Good evening, listeners. I am Harjas Kaur. So let's begin. Who is the most powerful person in a democracy? Is it the Prime Minister, the President, a judge, a celebrity, or someone with millions of followers on social media? You might be surprised by the answer. The most powerful force in our democracy is not a single individual. It's millions of ordinary people who choose to raise their voices together. Now imagine this. Tomorrow morning, you wake up to a strange world. Everything looks the same. People are going to work, children are heading to school, newspapers are being printed, and television channels are broadcasting the news. But there's one difference. Nobody is allowed to express an opinion. You cannot question a decision. You cannot disagree. You cannot vote. You cannot write a letter to the editor, post your thoughts online, or even peacefully protest. Would you still call that a democracy? I don't think so. Because democracy is not just about governments. It is not just about elections held every few years. Democracy is about something much deeper. It is about people having the freedom to think, to question, to participate, and to be heard. And that brings us to today's topic: democracy and public opinion, the power of collective expression. For the next few minutes, let's explore how ordinary voices, when united by a common purpose, become one of the greatest forces for change in any society. Let's begin with a simple question again. Have you ever chosen a restaurant because everybody recommended it? Or watched a movie because social media couldn't stop talking about it? Or perhaps avoided buying something after reading negative reviews? Without even realizing it, you've been influenced by public opinion. Now imagine that same influence shaping laws, national policies, environmental decisions, education systems, and even the future of a country. That's the real power of public opinion. Public opinion is simply the collective thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes of people on issues that affect society. And democracy gives those opinions a platform. Without public opinion, democracy becomes a body without a heartbeat. And here's something interesting. Many people think democracy means majority wins. But democracy isn't just about counting votes. It's also about listening to voices, even when they disagree. Especially, in fact, when they disagree. Because disagreement is not the enemy of democracy. Silence is. Healthy democracies encourage conversations. They encourage debates, questions. Because progress begins when someone dares to ask, can we do this better? Let's travel back in time for a moment. History is filled with ordinary people who changed extraordinary things simply by expressing themselves together. India's freedom movement was not won by one person alone. Millions of people spoke, they marched, protested, and believed in the same dream. Their collective voice became impossible to ignore. Across the world, many social reforms, from women's voting rights to civil rights movements, began with ordinary citizens refusing to remain silent. One voice can start a conversation, and 1,000 voices can start a movement. Millions of voices can change history. That is collective expression. And here's a thought. In today's digital world, expressing opinions has become incredibly easy. A single post can reach millions. A hashtag can trend worldwide. A short video can spark national debates. Social media has become the world's largest public square. It is both exciting and dangerous. Because while technology has amplified our voices, it has also amplified misinformation. Today, opinions travel faster than facts. Sometimes we share before we verify. We react before we reflect. And unfortunately, false information can influence public opinion just as quickly as truth. This reminds us that with the freedom to express comes the responsibility to think critically. Freedom of speech should never become freedom from responsibility. Let's consider another example. Imagine a classroom. The teachers ask, should homework be reduced? One student raises a hand, then another. Soon the entire class begins discussing different viewpoints. Some support the idea, others oppose it. Finally, after listening to everyone, the teacher decides to make some changes. That, in a very simple way, is democracy. Not because everyone agreed, because everyone had the opportunity to participate. Now imagine if one student was allowed to speak. Would that decision truly represent the class? Probably not. The same principle applies to a nation. Democracy grows stronger when participation grows wider. However, public opinion isn't always perfect. Sometimes the majority can be wrong. History reminds us of this too. There have been moments when popular opinion supported discrimination, inequality, or injustice. This is why democracies are built not only on majority opinion, but also on constitutional values, human rights, and the protection of minorities. True democracy balances the voice of the majority with the dignity of every individual. After all, the loudest voice isn't always the wisest voice. As citizens, our role extends far beyond voting once every few years. Democracy asks us to stay informed, to ask questions, to verify information, to participate in discussions, to respect differences, and most importantly, to listen. Listening may be one of the most underrated democratic skills. Because if everyone speaks and no one listens, dialogue becomes noise. There's a beautiful African proverb that says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." That perfectly captures the spirit of collective expression. Real change rarely happens because of one powerful individual. It happens because ordinary people discover that together their voices matter. Now I'd like you to imagine another situation. Suppose there's a small park in your neighborhood. Gradually garbage begins piling up. Children stop playing there. Nothing changes. One resident complains. Nothing happens. 5 complain. The authority notice. 50 residents sign a petition. Cleaning begins. What changed? The problem didn't change. The power of collective expression did. Sometimes governments don't ignore problems. Sometimes they simply don't realize how important they are until enough people speak together. But let me ask another question. Have you ever changed your opinion after hearing someone else's perspective? If yes, then congratulations. You have experienced one of democracy's greatest strengths. Democracy doesn't require us to always be right. It encourages us to remain open-minded. Changing your opinion after learning new facts isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Young people often wonder, what difference can one person make? The answer is quite a lot. Every movement starts with one person speaking. Every petition starts with one signature. Every election is decided one vote at a time. Every conversation begins with one sentence. Never underestimate small actions. History certainly doesn't. Before I conclude, I'd like to leave you with a small reflection. Imagine you're given a candle. You walk into a completely dark room, alone. That tiny flame doesn't seem very powerful. It cannot light the entire room at once. But now imagine hundreds of people entering with their own candles. One by one, every flame is lit. Suddenly the darkness begins to disappear. Not because one candle was extraordinarily bright, but because every single person chose to contribute their light. Democracy works in much the same way. Every opinion is like that small flame. By itself, it may appear insignificant. You may wonder, who will listen to me? Or will my opinion really make a difference? But when millions of people think carefully, speak responsibly, and participate honestly, those individuals' voices illuminate an entire nation. The strength of a democracy is never measured by the height of its building, the size of its economy, or the power of its military. It is measured by the courage of its citizens to speak the truth, to listen with respect, and to stand up for what is right, even when doing so isn't easy. Our Constitution gives us remarkable freedoms. Freedom to speak, the freedom to question, the freedom to choose our representatives. These rights were not handed to us casually. They were earned through tremendous sacrifice, determination, and an unwavering belief that every citizen deserves a voice. The question is not whether democracy gives us freedom. The real question is, what do we do with that freedom? Do we use it to spread anger or understanding? Do we use it to divide people or bring them together? Do we speak simply to be heard, or do we speak to make society better? because every opinion we express has consequences. Words can build trust, but they can also destroy it. They can inspire hope, but they can also spread fear. This is why democracy isn't merely, it asks us to speak with wisdom, kindness, and responsibility. Perhaps the greatest challenge of our generation is not finding a platform to express ourselves. We have plenty of those. The real challenge is learning to think before we speak, to verify before we share, and to understand before we judge. Imagine what our society could become if every citizen followed 3 simple principles. Stay informed, stay respectful, and stay involved. Imagine elections where people vote after understanding the issue instead of following rumors. Imagine social media where facts travel faster than misinformation. Imagine discussions where disagreement leads to better ideas instead of bitterness. That is the democracy we should strive to build, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will inherit it. Because at the end of the day, democracy is not someone else's responsibility. It belongs to every one of us. Let us remember something very important. Democracy isn't a gift that stays alive on its own. It survives only when citizens participate, when they care, when they question, when they respect different opinions. And when they choose dialogue over division, public opinion is not merely about agreeing with everyone. It is about creating space where everyone has the freedom to be heard. Because democracy flourishes not when everyone thinks alike, but when everyone has the right to think freely. I'd like to leave you with one final thought. A single drop of water seems insignificant, but millions of drops together become an ocean powerful enough to shape coastlines. Similarly, one voice may sound small, but when thousands or even millions of voices come together with purpose, honesty, and hope, they have the power to shape a nation. That is the true power of a collective expression. That is the spirit of democracy. So the next time you express an opinion, ask a thoughtful question, cast your vote, participate in a discussion, or simply listen respectfully to someone with a different viewpoint. Remember, you are not just speaking, you are strengthening democracy itself. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.